This is a presentation on vocabulary and the importance of vocabulary in the content areas. Vocabulary is one of the most important things to make sure that you cover in content areas because of the content-heavy vocabulary. Typically, students will not have a lot of prior knowledge about your content area unless they have a great interest in that topic to begin with. So here's a feeling of what students encounter with content vocabulary. Take a look at this word and think about, do you know what this word means? You probably recognize parts of it. Phobia is fear of, hippo as a big animal, and maybe you get the monstrosity in the middle. The big idea, and when we're thinking about vocabulary in the content areas, is to help them to recognize the word parts, the roots, the suffixes, and know that it is a phobia of some kind. When we see it in context, you might glean a better understanding of the word. The psychologist surmised that Jordan had hippopotamonstrosquipedalophobia, mainly because his hand hurt so much after writing lessons. So you get the idea. Writing, huge, fear of, and our phobia word here is a fear of large words. Students that encounter content-specific vocabulary and have problems with it spend too much time trying to figure out the word, or they tend to just give up. And because of the amount of time that they spend trying to figure out that word, they lose their fluency. And as a result of losing their fluency, they lose their metacognition. They're thinking and making meaning out of what it is that they're actually reading. Effective vocabulary instruction in middle and high school needs to have active engagement as well. When we talked about the adolescent learner, that is what we talked about. When we talked about content area reading, we need that active engagement. When you find that engagement and students are positively and personally involved with words, they're more likely to retain them. At the middle school and high school level, when you think about vocabulary, it's kind of similar to RTI. You have your Tier 1, which is your universal instruction, and those are sight words, words that all students will be more or less familiar with. Your Tier 2 are those struggling students, and we think about those vocabulary words as the multiple meaning words, where you might have to spend a little bit more time talking about those words to ensure that everyone understands them. Your Tier 3 vocabulary words in the content areas are those content-specific vocabulary words. And those are the words that you're going to need to hit the most. Those are the words that you're going to need to go over and over and over again to make sure that your students understand those terms. Next, I'm going to talk about 8 principles, ideas of effective direct vocabulary instruction. The first one is no more definitions. Don't have students copy the definition from the dictionary anymore. Why is that? Well, because dictionary definitions have limited explanations of the words because they have limited space. They only have about an inch worth of room in the dictionary to be able to write down a clear, well-understood definition of the word. Students understand and learn words better as descriptions in everyday language than in the smaller versions that they find in the dictionary. So for example, we have the word here, disrupt. The dictionary definition says to break up or split. It doesn't do it justice because if a student hears that, they might say, oh, I disrupted with my girlfriend this weekend. That doesn't quite fit the real meaning of what disrupt is. The description is easier to apply, cause difficulties that stop from continuing peacefully. Same with morbid. Dictionary meaning is not healthy or normal. The description is showing great interest in horrible, gruesome details, especially about death. So, no more dictionary copying. You need to use descriptions more so than those dictionary definitions. Our second idea is to use linguistic and non-linguistic representations. You want to provide language-based, which is your linguistic representation, and imagery-based, your non-linguistic representation for words. And this is called the dual coding theory. More of your focus should be on the non-linguistic techniques. If we want information to be anchored into the permanent memory, you must do both linguistic linguistic representations, looking at relatives of the words and word parts, the roots, suffixes, and prefixes, and also the non-linguistic, using the pictures, symbols to help students remember the words. You want to focus on non-linguistic techniques more so. Use graphic organizers to help represent the meaning of a word. Students create pictures, symbols, or pictographs to show what the word means. And also have them use visualization strategies to create the mental images of the words or act out the meanings to help solidify that in their memory. The third idea is to have multiple exposures. Typically, it takes 7 to 14 exposures for anything to stick in someone's memory. And after every exposure, your understanding deepens. With one exposure, that's called fast mapping, and you get a superficial level of understanding. Many students, most people are able to understand a term with just one exposure. Repeated exposures are called extended mapping, and that's what we want to provide for our students. You want students to interact with the terms in a variety of ways, writing the graphic representations, drawing pictures, acting them out, and you want them to look at ways to identify the similarities and the differences within the terms that they're learning. You can do that through comparing, looking at how terms are similar and different. You can look at classifying, grouping, sorting the words into certain categories typically created by the teacher. You can have them look at different kinds of metaphors about the words so that you're connecting the info. You're not looking at just the surface literal level, you're getting a deeper understanding through more abstract features. For example, the internet, talk about it as an information superhighway or a giant flea market, and that helps students to better understand what the internet is and the vastness of it and what it can do for you. One of the more complex and in-depth ways of working with vocabulary is using analogies, where you're seeing a relationship between two sets. That's the A is to B as C is to D. For example, in science, you might see something like this. Oxygen is to humans as blank is to blank, and the students would fill in the two blanks that would compare to how oxygen is to humans. Or you might see a nucleus is to an atom as blank is to blank, as the sun is to our solar system. Just some different ways of thinking about how to have students work with words. The fourth idea is to look at and work with the different word parts. You want to have students break down the words to figure out the meaning, similar to our first word at the beginning, where you teach specific roots to your content area, and you look at the similarities and meanings and make sure that they understand the affixes as well. And your affixes are your prefixes and suffixes. Prefixes come at the beginning of the word, and they change the meaning of that base or that root word. And a handful of prefixes are what changes the meaning of prefixed words. So 58% of prefixed words have the prefixes un, dis, re, and in. So those 4 prefixes should be on the top of the list of prefixes to teach. Suffixes, the word endings at the end of a word, change the part of speech, whether it's the tense, whether it is the state of being. That's the suffix. And there are 10 suffixes to focus on, and those 10 suffixes are going to impact 85% of the suffixed words. And most of them are S and ES to make the word plural, the ED ending, and the ING ending. So the changing of the tense makes up 65% of your suffixed words. The fifth topic is different types of words require a different type of instruction. You should look at the parts of speech to determine how best to teach the vocabulary for the unit. So for verbs, you might want to use frames or close activities. The example I have here could be for a history lesson about a battle or a war. You're teaching the word pacify. Who pacified whom? and there typically are nouns surrounding the verb. Concrete nouns, things, can be described. Think about a lever. You can easily give a description of what a lever is. Abstract nouns, more things that are ideas, should be taught with examples. So, for example, parsimony. If you use it in a sentence, I was practicing parsimony when I described the entire movie in a few sentences. Students can use the context of that sentence to figure out what the term means. You can also use semantic features, the characteristics and attributes of the word, to compare and contrast. If you're talking about an industrial city versus a port city, you can look at the similarities and differences in the settings and the physical characteristics of the cities, in the uses of each of the different kinds of cities. Just some different ways to teach depending on the type of word. Our sixth topic is to talk about the words among the students. We talked about that in content reading, and we talked about that with the adolescent learner. You want that collaboration. It's good to let kids talk. It gets them engaged. Discussion helps students encode information in their own words. Better for them to understand it if they can say it themselves. They can view things from another perspective. Sometimes hearing it from a student versus a teacher helps students to better understand what the word means. It's that kid talk versus the teacher talk. And it increases the probability that students are going to store words in their permanent memory. Adolescents don't want to look stupid in front of their peers. So more likely they're going to want to do it well and do the work so that they will come out looking like they know what they're doing. Next is play with the words. Logology. That's word and language play. Games are not intimidating, but the brain is working. It's almost like students are tricked into learning when they're playing a game. And in the middle and high school, this is widely underused. Think about walking into an elementary classroom. You'll see students working and manipulating with things and playing games. We're missing that at the upper levels. It provides manageable challenges. Games challenge students' capacity, but it allows them to have some kind of control. It arouses their curiosity. Their curiosity is piqued since the games can become complex and the outcome is unknown. And there's also that little bit of competition going on. And there's a little bit of fantasy arousal, not about fairy tales and imaginary things, but about imaginary circumstances that allow the use of growing abilities. Vocabulary games are great activities for any kind of break that you might need. It could hook your learner as an anticipatory set, great closing activity to keep them thinking about it, or can be used during any kind of downtime. Our last idea is focus on words that are going to enhance student success. This takes us full circle back to those tiered words. Tiered 1 are those sight words, those universal words that all students are pretty much familiar with. Tier 2 are the multiple meaning words that cross different content areas. And Tier 3 words are those highly specialized, content-specific vocabulary words that need to be focused on and emphasized the most. Regardless, students need that specific, subject-specific direct instruction. There are six steps for effective vocabulary instruction, and these are just general rules. The first 3 steps are the introduction of the word. The first step, the teacher provides a description, explanation, or example of the term, not a definition. Second step, students will write the concept in their own words. Third, you have that non-linguistic representation of the term with a sketch or graphic organizer. Steps 4 to 6 are using and reviewing the words. So fourth, you want to engage the students in activities using that comparing, classifying, metaphor, or analogy activity. Fifth, you want them to turn and talk, have students discuss words with peers. And then lastly, those games. Have them manipulate and play with words. Do some word sorts, Pictionary, I have, who has, Vocabo, which is like bingo, those kinds of things. Want to leave you thinking and remembering 7 to 14 meaningful exposures before words become part of the working vocabulary. More sophisticated vocabulary or college words with high complexity should be introduced only 1 a day. All right, that's the end of our show.